Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 355 of the Prancing Pony podcast, where I have already made my dispositions, crossing the Anduin with half my force.
And I will lead my host north through Ithilien. Folks, pull up a bench in the common room and join us. I'm Matt, the Nerd of the Rings, and I'm here with the Man of the West, who apparently has cast me in the role of the doomed King Ondoher, Alan Sisto.
Hey, if the crown fits, my friend. Folks, join us for a close look at Disaster on the Daggerlad as we continue our 6-episode digression through Cirion and Eorl.
The two of them will actually show up in this story next week, I promise.
I know, otherwise it's like sort of false advertising calling this Cirion and Eorl. Yeah.
Folks, no matter how you arrived, you're all welcome here in the common room. At the Prancing Pony podcast, we are reading and talking our way through Middle-earth with plenty of speculation and bad jokes along the way.
Of course. Now, we do love our deep dives into the lore, discussing our favorite themes, and a whole lot more.
But we try to keep it light and fun, like a couple friends chatting at the pub, and we're glad you've joined us.
And I'm sure you'll be glad you joined as well. But before we get to tonight's chapter discussion, it's time to look at a few of the names that we're rushing through this week in fan favorite Philology Fair. Now, we have been reading about King Ondoher, and while Don and I mentioned the meaning of his name when we first encountered him in Appendix A1, we should not only refresh your memory, but let you know a little bit about the development of the name. Ondoher is Quenya, and it's made up of two elements. The first is Ondo, stone as a material or mass of rock, and that's opposed to the word for an individual stone, which is Sar. We see that in words like Elisar, the elf stone. Now, Quenya Ondo is cognate with Sindarin Gondo, as in Gondolin, and Argonath, right, hidden rock and royal stones. The second element of Ondoher's name is Heru, which means lord or master. We see that in names like Kirjaher and Herunumen, Lord of the West. That was the Quenya name of Ar Adunakor, which is, the first rule about Quenya is we don't actually speak Quenya. It's cognate with Sindarin here, and we see that in Gwaihir, Wind Lord, and the Rohirrim, Horse Lords. Now, the interesting twist here about Ondoher's name is that Tolkien originally came up with his name as Ondohir, as Matt read when we looked at the peoples of Middle-earth last week. So originally, Ondohir was a mixed name with one element each from Quenya and Sindarin. It was only when Tolkien wrote the fuller version of the appendices for the second edition of The Lord of the Rings that Tolkien changed it to a pure Quenya, Ondoher. And we'll see another mixed name shortly.
Very shortly, but it's not the next name on the list. That would be Ondoher's eldest son, the one who died by his side in the battle near the Morannon, who was named Ardamir. This is also a Quenya name and consists, as usual, of two elements. The first is Arata, high, noble, exalted, lofty. Like we see in Aratar, a name for the 8 chiefs of the Valar, meaning high ones, or the exalted. Or in Artanis, which was Galadriel's father name and meant noble woman.
Not a name you hear her called very often, by the way.
That's true, yeah. Arata is cognate with Sindarin Arad, which we see in Finrod, or in the name of the horse of Rohan given to Legolas, simply Arad.
Yeah.
The second element is something we see a lot. It's the mire element, meaning jewel, gem, or precious thing. We see it in a lot of words. One of the fragrant trees of Númenor, Yavanna Mire, Miriel, jewel daughter, and the Elendilmir, the star of Elendil.
Yes.
It's cognate with Sindarin Mir, as in Gwaithí Mírdain.
Right. Now, it's interesting because, well, let me get to that in a minute. The name of his younger son, this is Ondoher going back to the beginning, Ondoher's youngest son, Faramir, is quite possibly a mixed name. Now, it's never glossed for us anywhere, which is interesting given the importance of the Faramir in The Lord of the Rings. But there is a footnote in Appendix F, the Languages and Peoples of Middle-earth, in the section of men, that gives us a possible clue. Now, the footnote is explaining that the names Númenor, Elendil, Isildur, and Anarion, and all the royal names of Gondor, including Elisar Elfstone, are Quenya, while most of the names of the other men and women of the Dunedain, such as Aragorn, Denethor, Gilrain, are of Sindarin form, being often the names of elves or men remembered in the songs and histories of the First Age, as Beren, Hurin, end quote. And that's all from the appendix. But it's the last line of the footnote that grabs my attention. Tolkien explains some few are of mixed forms as Boromir. Now, I can't say conclusively that the Fara element is Sindarin like his brother's Boron, which stands for steadfast, but his name ends with that same Mira element. So it's very likely that Faramir is a mixed source name, part Quenya, part Sindarin. Now, this is where it does get a little interesting and a little pedantic. I know some folks are thrown off by how deep we're going, but this is a philology fair, so we sort of kind of have to. How do you know if it's Quenya Mire and it's cognate with Sindarin Mir, how do we know that the names Boromir, Faramir, and even Artemir, how do we know they're using the Quenya version and not the Sindarin version? Well, that's because if the names were in Sindarin, the final Mir element actually gets lenited. It morphs, it changes to Vir. So you'd end up with Faravir and Boromir if those were using the Sindarin Mir element as opposed to the Quenya Mire element. And that's why I think we can say that Faramir is likely a mixed form. I just wish we knew what that first element meant. You know, like what's the Fara mean? What does Fara or Far? What does that mean in Faramir's name? But we don't know. It's never glossed
I'm
anymore.
more intrigued by the name Boromir.
I know. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, I think that's what we get the name Bovril from.
No, we don't. No, we do not get Bovril from Boromir.
Bovril, yeah.
Yeah.
But I said Bovril. Bovril.
You did say Bovril. Yeah.
Yeah. That's they're probably related.
Boromir.
Some form or fashion.
Yeah. So it's purely Sindarin and not a mixed form with Quenya?
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea. Now, the next name up is the name of Ondoher's nephew, the captain of the right wing, Minoktar. The Oktar element is similar to what you've heard before, the Mektar element in Kale Mektar, bright warrior, Telu Mektar, warrior of the sky, the name given to the constellation Orion. Oktar is a later word, meaning the same thing, warrior.
Right.
The first element in Minoktar's name is Minya, and it means first, eminent, or prominent.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen it in the first king of Númenor, Elros Tar Miniatur, first ruler, as well as an earlier king of Gondor, Minelkar, who is later called Romendakil II. So Minoktar means first warrior. As we'll read later, that makes good sense.
It does, yeah. Minoktar definitely knows what he's doing out here. Now, the next name to talk about, and there's not much really to say, actually, about the name Adrihil. He's the captain of the left wing, and as we'll mention later, there's a little bit of confusion about his being from Dol Amroth. But in Appendix E, Writing and Spelling, when we're reading about how to pronounce things, we read in a very small parenthetical aside that Imrahil is a Númenorian name. Well, given that, it's quite likely that this name, Adrihil, same heel element, is a name in the Adonaic language, something that appears often in the princes of Dol Amroth, beginning with Imrazor, the father of the first prince of Dol Amroth. So we don't know what it means. We just know that Adrihil is probably an Adonaic name. But now it's time to shift gears, stop talking about the people, and talk about a few of the places we're going to come across today. The first is a place you've heard mentioned many times, Dagorlad. It is the same in Quenya and in Sindarin, and it simply means battle plain. It consists of the element Dagor, means battle, right? Like in the battles of the First Age, the Dagor Aglareb, the Dagor Bragalach, Dagor Nuin Gileath, right? Those are the glorious battle, the battle of sudden flame, or the battle under stars. The Lad element simply means plain or valley. We don't see that a lot, but we do see it in Imlad Morgul, the Morgul Vale.
You'll also hear another familiar place, the Morannon. This is Sindarin, and you'll easily recognize the first part, Mor, which means black, dark, darkness, like pretty much every bad thing in Lord of the Rings. Mordor, Morgoth, Morgul, as well as Moria, Black Pit, and Morwen, Dark Maiden. The other element, Anon, is a word for a great and strong entrance. It's often translated gate, but can also refer to great doors like Enindurin, doors of Durin, where Anon is in the plural form as Enin.
Sort of like how Amon, like an individual peak, becomes Emin when it's a range, like Amon Hen versus the Emin Muil. So that's your singular versus plural. But yeah, more Anon, so Black Gate. Now, in fact, you actually hear that Anon in one of the passwords that Gandalf tries because he forgot to sign up for one pass at the doors of Durin. He says, Anon Ethelen Edro Hi Ammen, which translates as Elvish Gate, open now for us, which of course is very different from Elvis Gate, open now for us, which as everybody knows is the password for Graceland, Elvis Presley's mansion. Sorry, not sorry. You should see the look on Matt's face, folks.
Oh my God.
He's ashamed to be here with me, as you all should. Elvis Gate, open up now for us. Yeah. We also see Anon in the name of the stream that flows from the doors of Durin, the Cirion, the gate stream. So that's Morannon.
Finally, there are the Towers of the Teeth. Still under Gondor's control at this time, they're named Narchast and Carchast. They both have the OST element at the end, which means fort, fortress, stronghold, or city.
Yeah.
Like in Belegost, Fornost, or Ost in Ethil. Kark is fang, as in Karkaroth, red maw, but literally great red fang.
Yeah.
So Carchast is fang fort. The first element in the other tower is Nark, which Tolkien says means bitter biting. And we'll have to take his word for it since we don't see it anywhere else.
No, that's true. Some crazy words today. And of course, I gave Matt the most fun ones to pronounce. I mean,
as always,
Narchast, Karchast, Minochtar, Telemektar. Have fun with that, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I will say it's kind of interesting that these towers have such ominous sounding names when they were under Gondorian control.
I know.
You'd think they would name them like nicer things. Like
Tower of the Sunrise,
right.
Tower of Butterflies.
Like even, Tower of Guard is a nice name.
Minas Tirith? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been used before though.
I know, but something in that vein where it's like, okay, it's made for this purpose.
Yeah, you could call them like Vigilant Watch.
Yeah.
And something like, determined protection or something like that. I mean, I don't know what those words would be in but I know.
But it's like, we get all these like
Fang Fort, bitter
ominous
fort
sounding. Yeah, it's like.
Well, I guess if they're supposed to watch over Mordor, we're just speaking their language, right? We're telling the folks in Mordor better watch out. Like, this fort's bitter biting. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess so. Yeah. It doesn't seem like you'd be particularly jazzed to get that assignment.
No, I don't think this is probably. Yeah, I'm thinking if you're a Gondorian soldier, the last thing you want is to draw straws. Oh man, I got to go to Mordor and watch over the Morannon. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not the glorious assignment. No.
Yeah. Well, with that, Alan, I think it's about time we get to some reading for this week.
All right. Well, we'll pick up where we left off last week. News of the oncoming of the enemy reached Pelargir on the 9th day of Cermie in the year 1944. Eärnur had already made his dispositions. He had crossed the Anduin with half his force, and, leaving by design the fords of the Poros undefended, had encamped some 40 miles north in South Ithilien. King Ondoher had purposed to lead his host north through Ithilien and deploy it on the Dagorlad, a field of ill omen for the enemies of Gondor. At that time, the forts upon the line of the Anduin north of Sarngebir that had been built by Narmakil I were still in repair and manned by sufficient soldiers from Calanarthon to prevent any attempt of an enemy to cross the river at the Undeeps. But the news of the northern assault did not reach Ondoher until the morning of the 12th day of Cermie, by which time the enemy was already drawing near, whereas the army of Gondor had been moving more slowly than it would if Ondoher had received earlier warning, and its vanguard had not yet reached the gates of Mordor. The main force was leading with the king and his guards, followed by the soldiers of the right wing and the left wing, which would take up their places when they passed out of Ithilien and approached the Dagorlad. There they expected the assault to come from the north or northeast, as it had before in the Battle of the Plains and in the victory of Kalamektar on the Dagorlad. But it was not so. Oh, that's ominous.
Ominous indeed. We're full of ominosity.
Ominosity?
Yeah.
Ominousness?
You like that? You like that word that I just came up with?
I'm still deciding. Come back to me and ask me in another hour whether I like ominosity. Yeah.
How's that for your philology? Yeah. All right. Well, as we enter this bit of the text, we begin by learning that recon of the enemy's approach got to Pelargir, And remember, that's where Eärnur and his forces are based. And we see on the 9th day of Faramir. But we might need to explain what that means for those who needs a little translation here. At this time, Gondor was using a calendar called the King's Reckoning, and it consisted of 12 months and 3 days outside of those months.
That's right. The year, interestingly, was a mirror image of itself in that there was a single day outside the months that started the year, followed by 5 30-day months, a 31-day month, a single mid-year's day, unless it was a leap year and you had 2, followed by the exact same thing in reverse. So then you'd have a 31-day month, 5 30-day months, and then a single day outside the months at the end of the year. Now, James and I are going to cover this at length. I know, we're just warning you now.
Thank goodness it's James.
Wow. I mean, this is like a map chapter, right? The calendar chapter, the calendar episode is going to be
I would enjoy the map chapter much better than the calendar.
I think this is going to be fun because there's going to be a lot of cool word nerdery on
the
names of the months. And also, of course, we'll get to talk about the King's Reckoning versus there was another version. I think there was a Steward's Reckoning that slightly differed. And then we get to talk about the Shire calendar. And we get to also talk about how after Aragorn changes when the new year starts, right? Because now the new year is totally like in March.
Right, yeah.
It's really, it's going to be an interesting little section. So James and I
love how that's just a thing. Like,
it is.
We'll just change the calendar.
I'm just changing the calendar. I mean, heck, in history, that's exactly what happened, right? I mean, we had
that's true.
The Gregorian calendar and then the Julian calendar. I mean, all these things. So
I will say, I tease about the calendar a little bit here, but I do find it interesting as well. I love getting comments on my videos when I say something happened on February 30th and people lose their minds. They lose their minds.
There's no 30 days in February. Yes, there is.
They're like, what is wrong with you?
Yeah.
Like, there's only 28 except the leap year is 29. I'm like, well, not in Middle Earth.
Actually, let me stroke my neck beard and tell you that there actually is a 30th day. So like I said, James and I are going to cover this more at length. We're going to include discussion about the names of the months in Quenya and Sindarin, their relationship to the Shire calendar. And we'll talk about all of that sometime in June, or as I might call it in Quenya, Narie.
But this month in the story is Faramir.
Yes.
That's the 7th month in the year and most closely corresponds with the month of July in our calendars. And in fact, if I'm doing my counting correctly, this would be around July 2nd.
That's right. The days don't quite match up. And we'll get to that again in that later episode. Now, Eärnur is the first to get this news as he's based in Pelargir. And of course, he's already set up his forces.
Yeah, we'll see how he's deployed his forces, or at least part of how he set them up. Half his army has gone with him to cross the Anduin, but they intentionally don't defend the crossings of the Poros.
That's right. Now, if you remember from our discussion in the appendices, I think it was in the section on the stewards, that's the river that begins in the Efelduath, the Mountains of Shadow, and it runs kind of west-southwest until it bends and reaches the Anduin just before the great river itself reaches the sea. It forms the border between South Gondor and Ithilien. So at this point in history, it's effectively the southern border of Gondor because South Gondor has been a debatable land all the way back to the Kinstrim.
Yeah, it's not a river that we encounter much, but we actually just talked about it recently. It was here at the crossing of the Poros some 950 years from now, where the steward Turin II defeated the Haradrim with the help of the Rohirrim.
Yeah.
Specifically, King Folkwina's twin sons, Fastred and Folkred, who died in the battle.
That's right. But that's in the future, almost a millennium from now. For now, Eärnur leaves those crossings undefended. He camps his army about 40 miles to the north of this river in the southern portion of Ithilien. And we will come back to him and the southern army, but not until a lot later in today's episode.
Instead, we shift to King Ondoher and his plans to lead the northern army up through Ithilien and then prepare for the battle on the Daggerlad.
That's right. Now, the text here reminds us that the Daggerlad is a field of ill omen for Gondor's foes. I mean, let's be honest, Sauron's forces lost here in Second Age 34-34. And more recently, Kalamektar, that's Ondoher's father, defeated the Easterlings here just 45 years before. So as far as home field advantage goes, it's not really a bad call.
The bit in the parentheses about the forts on the Anduin are to let us know that he wasn't worried about being flanked. The force of Wainriders getting across the Anduin at the Undeeps, then coming down into Gondor from the north would be a problem, But there's enough manpower remaining at these forts to prevent this.
The problem, though, is that the news that got to Eärnur on the 9th day of Cermier didn't reach Ondoher until 3 days later, and that slow intelligence is a problem.
Now, by this point, the Wainrider forces are closing in, and the Gondorian forces are in a bit of disarray, with the lead units, the vanguard, not yet having reached the Morannon, the gates of Mordor.
Yeah.
The army appears to be moving in column up the road from Ithilien, with the main part up front with the king and the two wings each following in line.
Now, as anybody who's ever played a battle tactics game can tell you, marching in a column is great for speed and control, but it sacrifices security. And it is only used when speed is critical and, most notably, when enemy contact is unlikely. And we're going to run into a bit of a problem here with that. And that makes Ondoher's army here extremely vulnerable. They're still traveling to the battlefield. They are not ready for contact. And the lack of recon here is troubling. By not sending scouts ahead to A, determine how far away the Wainriders are, and B, really importantly, determine the direction from which they are attacking, Ondoher has put his army at a big disadvantage.
We've just talked about the disadvantage due to the timing issue. The army's still in columns when they need to be preparing for battle. But now we learn that Ondoher was expecting the attack to come from the north, or perhaps the northeast, as the Wainriders did 45 years before to his father.
And then we learn about this miscalculation in the most foreboding 5 words around these parts. But it was not so. Oh, man. No, I don't want to be Ondoher right now.
Yep.
No.
Bad news.
You know what he needs? He needs an ad break. We'll be right back. Now, soon we'll be getting back to Total War Middle-earth and the assault of the Wainriders. Kind of feels like that. Like this whole episode is like a tactics episode. We needed Brett Devereaux to join us, frankly. This would have been really good. Perfect for him.
Yeah.
But before we do get back to it, we want to remind you there's a lot more talk going on at the Prancing Pony podcast than just us.
The PPP has an amazing listener community. They're always coming up with great questions and discussions across all our social media spaces. Check out our common room on Facebook, our dedicated subreddit, Twitter, and more.
On Facebook, just look for the Prancing Pony podcast. Follow the page to get news, but you're going to want to join the group for some great discussions.
Or if you prefer Reddit, find us there at r/prancingponypod. On Twitter and Instagram, we're simply at prancingponypod.
And if you want daily Tolkien content, check out Today's Tolkien Times on YouTube and all your favorite podcast apps. It's my short format daily show with everything from Middle-earth Map Monday to Silmarillion Saturdays. And, you know, if I had a day of the week that started with a K sound, I'd have a calendar something day. You know?
Something.
Anyway, be sure to check it out at youtube.com/@TolkienTimes and follow @TolkienTimes on all your social media. But Matt, if you would pick up with the, shall we say, unprepared Ondoher.
The Wainriders had mustered a great host by the southern shores of the inland sea of Rhûn, strengthened by men of their kinsfolk in Rovanion and from their new allies in Khand. When all was ready, they set out for Gondor from the east, moving with all the speed they could along the line of the Ered Lithui, where their approach was not observed until too late. So it came to pass that the head of the army of Gondor had only drawn level with the gates of Mordor, the Morannon, when a great dust borne on a wind from the east announced the oncoming of the enemy vanguard. This was composed not only of the war chariots of the Wainriders, but also a force of cavalry far greater than any that had been expected. Ondoher had only time to turn and face the assault with his right flank close to the Morannon, and to send word to Minoktar, captain of the right wing behind, to cover his left flank as swiftly as he could, when the chariots and horsemen crashed into his disordered line. Of the confusion of the disaster that followed, few clear reports were ever brought to Gondor. Ondoher was utterly unprepared to meet a charge of horsemen and chariots in great weight. With his guard and his banner, he had hastily taken up a position on a low knoll. But this was of no avail. The main charge was hurled against his banner, and it was captured. His guard was almost annihilated, and he himself was slain, and his son Artemir at his side.
Wow. Now we learn just what a disaster this is about to be, don't we? The Wainriders alliance, which included folks from Rhovanion and Khand, had gathered together to the south of the Sea of Runes. That's pretty far out there. From there, they traveled, interestingly, along the lines of the Ered Lithwi. Those are the mountains of ash that make up the northern line of Mordor. So instead of traveling towards the Dagorlad from the northeast or from the north, as they would if they had come from Rhovanion, they were approaching directly from the east.
Yeah, more than that, because they were traveling at speed along the edges of the mountains, their approach wasn't seen until it was too late.
Mm-hmm.
Earlier, we talked about how the vanguard of Ondoher's forces hadn't even got to the gates of Mordor. And here we read that they'd only drawn level with them when they could spot the dust clouds announcing the pending arrival of the Wainriders.
Man, that is trouble. Now, the footnote here is interesting and well worth reading. Christopher explains there is an isolated note connected to this text that explains a few things. First, that Gondor was still in control of the Morannon itself, and that's interesting because we thought by now the watch had failed. But the two watchtowers built by Gondor were still under their control. These are the ones they built after the defeat of Sauron at the end of the Second Age. And like we talked about in the Philology Fair, those are Carchast, which is to the east, that's Fangfort, and Narchast, which is the western one, and that's the Bitter Biting Fort.
But what's interesting here is the road infrastructure. Of course, there's a road going through Ithilien up to the Morannon, and we see that road on the maps. But there's also a road going north toward the Dagorlad, which is not on the maps. And much to Ondoher's dismay at the moment, a road going east along the line of the Ered Lithwi.
And that's where it gets interesting, because according to the footnote, the eastward road extended to a point north of the site of Barad-dûr. So that goes pretty far over.
Yeah.
It had never been completed further, and what had been made was now long neglected. Nonetheless, its first 50 miles, which had once been fully constructed, greatly speeded the Wainriders' approach. Oops. Yeah, that's building a road that you're never going to use, that it turns out is only going to benefit your enemy. That is unfortunate.
Yeah.
But as for the Wainrider army that's approaching, it not only has the typical chariots used by the Wainriders, but it also includes an unexpectedly large amount of cavalry. So they are moving, or at least their vanguard is moving, at great speed.
As a result, Ondoher didn't have time to position his army to defend against the charge of the chariots and cavalry. And he turns his part of the army, the center, with his right flank close to Morannon itself, and sends messages back to the leader of his right wing.
And of course, that's Minoktar, who we talked about in the Philology Fair. He's been now commanded to come up and guard the left flank, right? He was originally the captain of the right wing, but Ondoher's forces are lined up with his right flank right up against the Morannon, so there's no room. He needs to come around and guard the left flank because the left wing is behind them and isn't going to arrive in time. So he gets those messages off just as his forces are hammered by the cavalry of the Wainriders.
Yeah, it's so bad that the chronicler tells us that few clear reports of this incident ever made it back to Gondor.
Because very few people survived, is what it sounds like. I mean, this was just a disaster. Ondoher was not ready to defend against a charge of this size, but he does what he can. I mean, he doesn't retreat in the face of the enemy, right? He takes his guard and his banner up onto a low hill. And we have another really cool footnote here as we learn that historians believe. I love that. I love how in-depth Tolkien gets in writing this, right? He's making it all up himself. Historians, as in the historians in my head, believe this was the same hill as that upon which King Elessar made his stand in the last battle against Sauron, with which the Third Age ended.
That's good stuff.
Isn't it?
I like it. And if it was, it was smaller at this point than it was at the end of the Third Age.
Yes.
Christopher points us to a passage in The Return of the King. Aragorn now set the host in such array as could best be contrived, and they were drawn up on two great hills of blasted stone and earth that orcs had piled in years of labor.
No orcs here yet, so no labor, so the hills aren't piled as high, which it might explain why taking a defensive position on this small hill was of no avail.
Yeah. So planting his banner there certainly draws the attention of the Wainriders, who throw their biggest charge right at him, capturing the banner, killing most of his guard, and killing the King Ondoher and his son, Ardamir.
Yeah.
And I mean, thank goodness his other son is
isn't
back
it good
home, right?
Faramir is back in Minas Tirith.
That's such a good thing.
It's such a good law
So
that says
smart.
the king shouldn't take all his heirs with him.
So
Yeah.
smart of them.
Oh, man.
I sure hope nothing bad happens to Faramir.
I know. I hope they're watching him really closely. In the brief part that we skipped, we learned that the bodies of the king and his son were never recovered. Again, this comes sort of in the same vein as, reports didn't even make it back. I mean, this was so bad that it took a long time for us to figure out what really happened here. The Wainriders don't stop there, of course. They flow right on by, charging into the ranks of the Gondorian army, causing disorder and eventually a rout of the center forces.
Yeah. And many of those routed forces head west into the Dead Marshes, which is not a place,
Yeah, it's kind of your last resort. You don't want to go there.
The definition of a last resort, I think.
1 star, would not recommend. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, with that, let's keep reading. What do you say, Alan?
All right. Minoktar took command. He was a man both valiant and war-wise. The first fury of the onslaught was spent, with far less loss and greater success than the enemy had looked for. The cavalry and chariots now withdrew, for the main host of the Wainriders was approaching. In such time as he had, Minoktar, raising his own banner, rallied the remaining men of the center and those of his own command that were at hand. He at once sent messengers to Adrihil of Dol Amroth, the captain of the left wing, commanding him to withdraw with all the speed he could, both his own command and those at the rear of the right wing who had not yet been engaged. With these forces, he was to take up a defensive position between Cairandros, which was manned, and the mountains of Efelduath, where, owing to the great eastward loop of the Anduin, the land was at its narrowest, to cover as long as he could the approaches to Minas Tirith. Minoktar himself, to allow time for this retreat, would form a rear guard and attempt to stem the advance of the main host of the Wainriders. Adrihil should at once send messengers to find Eärnur if they could, and inform him of the disaster of the Morannon and of the position of the retreating northern army. When the main host of the Wainriders advanced to the attack, it was then 2 hours after noon, and Minoktar had withdrawn his line to the head of the Great North Road of Ithilien, half a mile beyond the point where it turned east to the watchtowers of the Morannon. The first triumph of the Wainriders was now the beginning of their undoing. Ignorant of the numbers and ordering of the defending army, they had launched their first onslaught too soon, before the greater part of that army had come out of the narrow land of Ithilien, and the charge of their chariots and cavalry had met with a success far swifter and more overwhelming than they had expected. Their main onslaught was then too long delayed, and they could no longer use their greater numbers with full effect, according to the tactics they had intended, being accustomed to warfare in open lands. It may well be supposed that, elated by the fall of the king and the rout of a large part of the opposing center, they believed that they had already overthrown the defending army, and that their own main army had little more to do than advance to the invasion and occupation of Gondor. If that were so, they were deceived. I love this. This whole story is about, it wasn't this way, but it was this way, but it wasn't this way, and it was this way. And like everybody is completely lacking intelligence. Yeah.
Yeah. We start with Minoktar here. He's the captain of the right wing that Ondoher had ordered to come up and around to guard the main force's left flank.
And now he is in command with the death of Ondoher. And that might be a good thing. Not Ondoher's death, mind you, but Minoktar's command, because he is described as both valiant and war-wise. He's experienced. He knows his battlefield tactics, and he immediately takes stock of the situation.
Yeah, the initial onslaught is over, but the enemy has had it really good so far.
Yeah, maybe too
fewer
good.
losses and having more success than even their best case scenario.
Yeah. But now, as they should, the cavalry and chariots of the Wainriders are pulling back to make way for the main host. So Minoktar rallies his own men along with what was left of Ondoher's men. But before he takes any further action, he sends a message to his equal, the captain of the left wing, and that's Adrihil of Dol Amroth.
Yeah, and there's a footnote about him that gets us into some pretty deep weeds about the title Prince of Dol Amroth and the origin of that house. But long story short, there are two origin stories, one
Mhm.
provided by Tolkien later in the story, footnote 39, which we'll get into in 3 more episodes,
Mhm.
and one in the history of Galadriel and Celeborn.
Now, we'll cover that in the postscript for this episode. So if you're not a member of the Fellowship of the Podcast, take care of that, and you'll get to hear more on this. Remember, we do 10 to 15-minute postscripts for every chapter-based episode, and we have since season 2 led off, all the way back with episode 53. But that's enough of trying to tell you how good the P5s are. All right, knowing we're going to touch on this Adrihil of Dol Amroth problem later, let's go ahead and take a look at the message that was sent to him by Minoktar.
Withdraw, get back, take everyone in your own force, as well as those in the back of the right wing that haven't yet been engaged in battle, and fall back to a defensive position in northern Ithilien between Caer Andros and the Mountains of Shadow, since the land is narrow there. And your job, Adrihil, is to ensure that this Wainrider army can't go south to Minas Tirith unopposed.
That's right.
Your mission, should you choose to
accept it. Yeah.
Except you don't have a choice.
I know. Should you choose to accept it? Because if you don't, well,
we're all screwed.
We're all, yeah, exactly. But yeah, I mean, his message is simple. Run away. Go back. Now, in the meantime, Minoktar is going to form a rear guard with his remaining forces. That includes, of course, a few remnants of Ondoher's center. And he's going to try to slow down the main host. While he's doing that, Adrihil not only needs to take that defensive position, he needs to get word to Eärnur about what happened and where he can reunite with the remnant of the Northern Army.
Yeah, and once again, we're looking at a very important rear guard battle, just as we've mentioned a couple times in recent episodes.
Exactly. It's really becoming an important thing. And I think really we see that throughout Tolkien. We'll have to, one of these days, list all the rear guard battles. There's going to be quite a few. So we get to the attack now of the Wainriders, and it's mid-afternoon, right? 2:00 in the afternoon. It's already been a very long day. Minoktar has pulled back to a spot on the road just after it's turned from Ithilien towards the Morannon itself.
And we read that the Wainriders' initial success is described as the beginning of their undoing.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of proves that you can, after all, have too much of a good thing, it seems.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, briefly, we actually see the beginning of the battle now from their perspective. It's very interesting. They didn't have good recon any more than Gondor did. They were ignorant of the numbers. They were ignorant of how Gondor had arrayed their forces.
Yeah, and as a result, they attacked too soon, killing a good chunk of Gondor's army, of course, but including the king.
Well, yeah, that's important.
Yeah, having to withdraw before most of the army had come out of Ithilien.
Exactly. If they just waited for more of the column to come out, they would have been able to wipe out even more of the forces. So their initial success against a smaller part of the army was so overwhelming that they were forced to withdraw, right? I mean, the idea had, it seems, been to engage with the vanguard of chariots and cavalry, and then while they were engaged, bring up the infantry to overwhelm. But they couldn't do that anymore, could they?
Yeah, they could no longer use their greater numbers with full effect, and it's literally because they attacked too early and were literally too successful.
Isn't that wild? But that's, of course, the opinion of the Gondorian historians analyzing the battle, or Tolkien's version of the Gondorian historians analyzing the battle. But we also get a suggestion, perhaps from other chroniclers or historians, that maybe the Wainriders believed they'd already routed the entire army and that the only thing left to do was mop-up action. Now, in the paragraph we skipped, we read that they do keep riding forward, but not in very good order. They're singing songs, maybe We Are the Champions or its third age equivalent, and probably partying as they march.
Yeah. Until they head south on the road toward Osgiliath and Minas Tirith, where the land is narrow and the army could only travel in column down the highway.
And the final line before the text ends, and Christopher then does his best with the notes, is about the road running through a deep cutting. And I cannot help thinking this is the precise place where Faramir and his men ambushed the Haradrim, heading to Mordor right after Frodo and Sam encountered them. And that's also the same deep cutting where Aragorn's forces trapped and defeated an attempted ambush. And I'm going to read that from the Black Gate Opens and tell me if you don't think this is exactly where this incident is going to take place. It was near the end of the second day of their march from the crossroads that they first met any offer of battle. For a strong force of orcs and Easterlings attempted to take their leading companies in an ambush. And that was in the very place where Faramir had waylaid the men of Harad, and the road went in a deep cutting through an outthrust of the eastward hills. To me, that's exactly what's going on here. And,
sure,
it's a shame the text gets cut off here, right? I mean, that's really, we're having to go into the notes at that point, but I have a feeling that's what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
All right, Matt, let's go ahead and leave this battle and head back to Minas Tirith for a little bit and see what's going on with that guy, Faramir.
Possibly be going on.
Keep hanging around and ruling the city. Yeah.
Yeah. Clearly, he's probably just chilling at home.
It's a good thing. He's just
writing
hanging
and
out.
reading. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, let's find out.
Yeah, we should.
Ondoher's second son, Faramir, was ordered to remain in Minas Tirith as regent, for it was not permitted by the law that both his sons should go into battle at the same time. A similar observation is made earlier in the narrative. But Faramir did not do so. He went to the war in disguise and was slain. The writing is here almost impossible to decipher, but it seems that Faramir joined the Eotheod and was caught with a party of them as they retreated toward the dead marshes. The leader of the Eotheod, whose name is indecipherable after the first element, Mar, came to their rescue, but Faramir died in his arms, and it was only when he searched his body that he found tokens that showed that he was the prince. The leader of the Eotheod then went to join Minoktar at the head of the North Road in Ithilien, who at that very moment was giving an order for a message to be taken to the prince in Minas Tirith, who was now the king. It was then that the leader of the Eotheod gave him the news that the prince had gone disguised to the battle and had been slain.
Oops.
Clearly, Faramir is no Eowyn.
Clearly, Faramir is no Faramir, right?
Yes, he's not even Faramir. He's no Faramir or Eowyn.
He's no third age Faramir here.
No
who would know
Faramir.
his job. Yeah.
Yeah.
But who also would have been left behind in Minas Tirith by his father.
Right. Yes, he would. It gets left behind in Minas Tirith by Aragorn.
Exactly. In the very brief line or two that we skipped, Christopher is explaining that the text ends here and the notes are pretty much illegible, which goes for a lot of the things that Tolkien wrote.
Right.
But Christopher is able to make out a few things, and that's what we'll look at in this section.
Yeah. First, that the Eotheod fought alongside Ondoher.
Yeah.
And second, where we picked up that the king's younger son, Faramir, had been made regent in his father's absence, and that the law forbade him from going to battle alongside his brother.
Yep.
And the idea there being to maintain the bloodline and ensure that one of the heirs survives.
Exactly, Faramir.
But apparently, Faramir didn't want to be left behind, so he disguises himself and heads off to war and is promptly killed.
Yes, bad decisions. Fortunately, Tolkien gives us the circumstances of his death here. First, he explains that Faramir had joined the Eotheod. Now, that makes a little bit of sense, actually, to me. I mean, no matter how good his disguise was, if he had joined a Gondorian unit, it's far more likely that it would have been found out. So, yeah, join people who don't know you. But I have to say, you mentioned Eowyn earlier, and I was already thinking that. Isn't it interesting that here we have a member of the king's family who's not supposed to go to war, stay behind and help the people, gets in disguise and goes and fights with the Eotheod.
Yeah.
I mean, it's Eowyn, but it's not Eowyn. Also, doesn't survive.
Yeah. And Eowyn hides among her own people, so she is clearly better at disguises than Faramir would have been.
I think in also, though, she would have been so unexpectedly there. Like,
yes, that's true.
Even if you'd recognize, you'd be like, wow, that guy looks like Eowyn. I mean,
right. Yeah.
Because of course she's not here. Yeah.
And also, like, Eowyn leaves, like, it's risking the same thing. It's risking the wiping out of that bloodline.
Mm-hmm. She's got an obligation, right? A duty, a responsibility. Yeah. We talked about that before. Totally understand why she did it. Not even going to give her grief for doing it because she was fulfilling prophecy. But she had a familial and royal obligation to stay behind and lead her people. Yeah.
Right. We trust in the line of Eorl.
The House of Eorl. Yeah. I remember that because Han was like, well, House of Eorl. Yeah, but we got everybody in the House of Eorl's going. Yeah. Did you forget about Eowyn? Because Eowyn's pretty amazing.
Love that. Yeah. I love that moment.
That's great.
So good.
Yeah. Faramir here. It's just so interesting to see this parallel, especially with this guy's name being Faramir.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so what happens to him?
Easy connection there. Yeah. So while fighting with the Eotheod, they retreat toward the dead marshes. And remember earlier in this episode when we read about the Wainriders driving deep into the disordered ranks of Gondor, hurling them back in confusion upon those behind, and scattering and pursuing many others westward into the dead marshes.
Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly the retreat that is impacting Faramir here. Well, the unnamed leader of the Eotheod, according to Christopher Tolkien, it starts with that mar prefix, which is Gothic for horse, kind of like the Eo prefix is for the later Rohirrim. Well, that guy eventually came to their rescue. It was too late. When he searched the body, and I had to wonder, like, do they have time in the middle of the battle to be searching bodies? But I think it's because he realized, I don't recognize this guy. He's not one of my people.
Yeah.
And he looks like an outsider. He's not tall and blonde like all of us, right? Maybe he's even a Gondorian. That's when he finds evidence of some kind that he's actually the Prince of Gondor. Oh, no. I got to break some bad news to somebody.
Yeah. And he personally goes to Minoktar while they're preparing the defense in Ithilien at the exact moment that Minoktar was sending a message to Faramir, supposedly still in Minas Tirith, telling him, "You're the new king, buddy.
Congratulations on your promotion. Also, sorry your dad's dead." Yeah.
Yeah. But instead he finds out that Faramir was here and had been killed. And now I'm kind of thinking of that moment where Éomer suddenly finds his wounded sister on the Pelennor.
Yeah.
Like, she's not even supposed to be there. Like, totally out of left field,
like,
you know?
What? The what?
Yeah.
Oh, man. And I got to say, I mean, I know in the books, that's a moment, right? When they see her being brought back in.
Yeah.
But in the films, Carl Urban just nails that moment, right? I mean, what an emotional.
Such a guttural, like, just.
That scream. You feel it all the way to your core.
Yeah.
Now, in the last paragraph of this section that we did end up skipping, we learned the whole point of this section, why it was included. And I mean this entire last 2 episodes, right? Why are we talking about a battle between the Wainriders and Gondor hundreds of years before Cirion and Eorl when this is supposedly the Chronicles of Cirion and Eorl?
Yeah. Because they fought alongside Gondor again, and because this leader of the Eotheod brought news of Faramir's death to Minoktar. That's why the story makes it in here.
Yeah, absolutely. Good enough for me. All right, folks, we'll come right back after the break. Now, folks, if you're enjoying the PPP, please consider supporting the show by joining the Fellowship of the Podcast. It's what gives me the time and resources to work on making this show better every season. When you join, you get the best Discord community around. That includes live episode recordings and hangouts every month. You also get really cool episode postscripts. You can get an ad-free feed. You can get free merch and more.
You can also become part of our Questions After Nightfall episodes, or even join us as a guest in the North Wing. So please go to patreon.com/prancingponypod to show your support and join the Fellowship of the Podcast.
Of course, you can always help us out by giving us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts and a rating on Spotify. And please recommend us to your friends.
Well, with that, let's get to our last reading of this episode. Alan, would you do the honors, please?
I will indeed. Christopher says, the concluding passage of the fully written text gives the impression that the host of the Wainriders were about to receive a check to their exaltation and elation as they came down the highway into the deep cutting. But the notes at the end show that they were not long held up by the rearguard defense of Minoktar. The Wainriders poured relentlessly into Ithilien, and late on the 13th day of Cermier, they overwhelmed Minoktar, who was slain by an arrow. He is here said to have been King Ondoher's sister's son. His men carried him out of the fray, and all that remained of the rearguard fled southwards to find Adrahil. The chief commander of the Wainriders then called a halt to the advance and held a feast. Nothing more can be made out, but the brief account in Appendix A to The Lord of the Rings tells how Eärnur came up from the south and routed them. In 1944, King Ondoher and both his sons, Artemir and Faramir, fell in battle north of the Morannon, and the enemy poured into Ithilien. But Eärnur, captain of the Southern Army, won a great victory in South Ithilien and destroyed the army of Harad that had crossed the river Boros. Hastening north, He gathered to him all that he could of the retreating northern army and came up against the main camp of the Wainriders while they were feasting and reveling, believing that Gondor was overthrown and that nothing remained but to take the spoil. Eärnur stormed the camp and set fire to the wains and drove the enemy in a great rout out of Ithilien. A great part of those who fled before him perished in the dead marshes. So after giving us that quote from the appendix, Christopher Tolkien comes back in and explains, in the Tale of Years, the victory of Eärnur is called the Battle of the Camp. After the deaths of Ondoher and both his sons at the Morannon, Arvedwi, last king of the northern realm, laid claim to the crown of Gondor. But his claim was rejected, and in the year following the Battle of the Camp, Eärnur became king. His son was Eärnur, who died in Minas Morgul after accepting the challenge of the Lord of the Nazgul, and was the last of the kings of the southern realm.
So we start with more of Christopher's note here as he tries to give us what he can of the final passage, which is still presumably mostly illegible.
It pretty much describes Tolkien's corpus. I mean,
it does, yeah.
Well,
like we've said this before, I know on previous episodes, seeing them in person, up at Marquette, like you really get an appreciation for the work that Christopher did.
Yeah. As well as all the other scholars. I mean, I'm
not to minimize the others.
Hammond and Christina Skull. I'm thinking of Carl Hostetter for Nature of Middle-earth. All these things that require digging through. Yeah, or History of the Hobbit, John Ratliff. I mean, the stuff that Tolkien wrote was so hard to read sometimes. Yeah.
Now, he's able to determine that the impression of the final passage is that the Wainriders are about to get humbled or receive a check to their exaltation and elation.
I do love the way Christopher puts that, right? Oh, they're going to receive a check to their exaltation. They're going to get smacked down.
Yeah.
But whatever actually happened there in the cutting, Christopher is only able to point out the notes at the end, which suggested that they honestly weren't held up long by Minoktar's valiant rearguard action.
Yeah.
And that's just, overwhelming numbers. Right? Quantity has a quality all its own. Specifically, the Wainriders poured relentlessly into Ithilien, and late on the 13th day of Cermier, they overwhelmed Minoktar, killing him with an arrow shot. And that, of course, is the very next day after the death of Ondoher on the 12th of Cermier.
Yeah, we also learn here that Minoktar was Ondoher's nephew.
Yeah.
And that after he was shot, he was carried out of the fray, and all that remained of the rear guard fled southwards to find Adrahil.
I'm beginning to, this is not in our notes at all, but all of a sudden I just thought about this. Minoktar was Ondoher's nephew. Mm-hmm. Might he have been the king?
Oh,
had he survived instead of Eärnur?
That's a great point.
I mean, Eärnur's of royal descent.
Yeah.
But you have to go back, I think, 3 generations for him to trace his ancestry to a king.
Yeah. It's a while.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Whereas clearly Minoktar, who was valiant and war-wise and had a much closer kinship with the king, might have had the upper hand in that claim. That's interesting. Oh, if only, because really, and it's not Eärnur's fault, it's his son, Eärnur. But the whole reason why that kingship dies and why the stewardship has to rule for a millennium is because of Eärnur.
Yeah, because of him taking the bait of the Witch King. Exactly. How would this have played out differently if you had...
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe someone of Adrahil's line has more restraint. Even
Adrahil. I was thinking of Minoktar, but Adrahil of Dol Amroth. I don't know.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I meant Minoktar.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. Yeah, because that would have been interesting too to see. But that's a whole separate royal line, the Prince of Dol Amroth line. But it's just an interesting what if. If Minoktar had survived and then become king, because then we wouldn't have had Biff in Minas Morgul issuing the challenge and calling, King Marty McFly chicken. Because that's really what happens. You just,
It is. Yeah.
I do love that, right?
There's no reason for him to do that.
None.
Yeah.
Don't be stupid, man. Don't. Anyway, I'm coming back to the Wainriders here though, and thinking you've just poured relentlessly into Ithilien. You've killed the king. You've now killed the next in command. Matt, you and I both follow sports. You know the old adage in pretty much every sport, but I'm thinking particularly in football, right? Don't let your foot off the gas. You've got a big lead. Don't take it easy and coast. Crush your opponent. Don't let them get back in the game.
Yeah. same thing, basketball, whatever.
Exactly. You've got a 30-point lead going into the fourth quarter. Don't just decide, I'm going to play my rookies in the fourth quarter and hope that they don't lose the lead, right?
Yeah.
Step on the gas, keep your opponent down. The Wainriders clearly have not heard this suggestion as they stop their advance and hold a feast.
Yeah.
It's time to party, guys. We just killed the second in command.
We got this in the bag. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's when Christopher just lifts a section straight out of Appendix A to tell us what happened. But we've read it here just as we read it a few episodes ago.
Yeah.
So there's no need to fully discuss it again.
No.
After Eärnur defeated the Haradrim in South Ithilien, he went north, gathering retreating soldiers as he went. And while the Wainriders are doing their partying, he comes up and storms the camp, burns the wagons, routed them, and many of them are dying in the dead marshes.
Along with the ones that they had routed earlier.
Yes.
I mean, that's so, right. I mean, the dead marshes are just, again, trying to avoid that place. Yeah.
Yeah.
We then return to Christopher's notes as he reminds us that this was called the Battle of the Camp, at least according to the Tale of Years. That's Appendix B. Then we get a recap of what Don and I talked about several episodes back in both 347 and 349. And that's the claim of Arvedwi after the death of Ondoher and his sons, Gondor's refusal of his claim, the rise to kingship of Eärnur, the victorious captain, followed by his fool of a son and his decision to accept the Witch King's challenge. Interestingly, the text in Appendix A leaves room for questions. As we read back then, Eärnur had held the crown only 7 years when the Lord of Morgul repeated his challenge, taunting the king that to the faint heart of his youth, he had now added the weakness of age. Okay, sidebar, I might actually feel like I had to accept that challenge at that point. Like, screw you, man.
50's the new 40.
That's right. That's right. Then Mardil could no longer restrain him, and he rode with a small escort of knights to the gate of Minas Morgul. And this is the line I want to pay attention to. None of that writing were ever heard of again. It was believed in Gondor that the faithless enemy had trapped the king and that he died in torment in Minas Morgul. Okay, that leaves room for interpretation. But what about this?
Yeah, so it says it was believed in Gondor that he had died in torment, but it's kind of one of those some say moments.
Exactly.
But here, Christopher seems to explicitly state that Eärnur died in Minas Morgul after accepting the Witch King's challenge. So what do we make of this? Alan?
Part of me wants to think that's Christopher just drawing the logical conclusion that this some say is true, right?
Yeah.
Because what do we say about the some says? 9 times out of 10, the some says are exactly what happened.
Yeah. The some says are pretty reliable.
They really are.
Whatever the some are, they say a lot of right things.
Yeah, I mean, the only one that I'm not 100% sure on is Tuor. And that, know, some say he was considered, an elf.
Oh, interesting.
I'm not sure that one means really what it says. I think that might be one of the some says that isn't true.
So you think Tuor just died a mortal death?
Well, I don't think that the Valar don't have the authority to take the gift of men away from mortals. So I don't know that they could grant him that. You can take an elf or a half-elf.
But they can put it on their Christmas list, and Eru can grant it if he chooses.
I suppose. I suppose that's true. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, I don't even know that. Can Eru undo what he's already done? That's sort of like the whole, can God make a rock so big you can't lift it? I mean, don't even ask. That's just one of those philosophical, you're never going to get an answer you like kind of thing.
Right.
But yeah, I have a feeling like, no, Tuor still had to die and leave the circles of the world because he was a mortal man. But anyway, other than that, and I know that's a long digression to say that most of the some says are really what happened.
Accurate, yeah.
So in this case, it's maybe Christopher just saying, it does seem to look like he died. I like having the room for interpretation that he didn't really die, that he became sort of like a lesser wraith. I really do like that spin that Lotro put on it, but
we could just go Shadow of Mordor route and he becomes a
ring wraith. That's the thing.
Yeah, everybody gets a
ring. You get a ring. Helm Hammerhand gets a ring.
Yeah.
Shelob gets a sexy black dress. Don't get me started on that.
There we go. We got started on that.
We really did.
Yeah, I think it's a fair conclusion to draw.
Oh, it is. Yeah, I'm certainly not disagreeing. I mean, Christopher's probably right. I just like the idea of there being a little bit of room to play on this one.
Yeah, I do think like he died in torment, it's very open-ended how long that torment lasted.
Oh yeah. Hundreds of years, perhaps.
It could be, at least decades, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, could they artificially extend his life, and make it centuries as opposed to, him having to die human age?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of The Mouth of Sauron, where he talks about the torment of years. And I'll get the exact quote here. Yeah.
Go for it.
Yeah. And now he shall endure the slow torment of years, as long and slow as our art in the great tower can contrive, and never be released, unless maybe when he is changed and broken, so that he may come to you, and you shall see what you have done.
Nicely done. A nice voice
Sauron.
for the mouth of Sauron there.
But yeah, it sounds like they've got some, got a particular set of skills.
Well, I mean, and I know it's not canon, and let me just repeat that it is not canon, but in The Rings of Power recently, Anatar, right, he's torturing Celebrimbor, and he's basically implying, I can keep you alive for a long time if I really want to.
Yeah.
And then he loses his temper and kills him.
Right. But, immediately. Yes.
Yeah.
I just think of, my passing reference at Liam Neeson there, particular set of skills.
I like that.
Yeah. He can hook him up to the electricity, and
keep him alive for a while.
Right.
All right. Well, in the Tale of Years, the victory of Barliman is called the Battle of the Bag, after the deaths of Bob and Nob and their sons at the Prancing Pony.
Poor Bob and Nob. Killed off Bob and Nob.
Man, what did they do?
Right?
All right, Matt. What does Barliman have in the bag for us tonight?
All right. We're hearing from Donald in Ohio today, who says, we've seen a lot of depictions of Middle-earth over the years. Rankin Bass, Ralph Bakshi, Peter Jackson, The Amazon Show, and now Kenji Kamiyama. What filmmakers would you love to see take on Middle-earth?
Oh,
that's an interesting one.
That is, because I'm not super well versed in cinema. This would have been a great question for Sean. He knows his movie directors and producers really well.
One that I definitely don't want is John Borman.
Oh my goodness, the Borman script. The Borman script. We should do a whole intro on the Borman script at some point.
On the Borman script, yeah.
I know I'm going to talk about that in the sequel to Why We Love Middle Earth. I've got a whole chapter that I'm cooking up on adaptations that never were. That includes the Borman script, the Zimmerman script or treatment, the notional idea of a Beatles adaptation with Stanley Kubrick as the director.
Yeah.
Which is
now Kubrick is one that you can imagine how crazy that would have gotten.
Well, it would have been about 37 hours. It would have to be. I mean, I think it would really be slow, but maybe that would be good. I can think of one other I wouldn't want it to be, and it's the one that the Weinstein brothers threatened Peter Jackson with. Do you remember?
Yeah. Quentin Tarantino, right?
Quentin Tarantino.
I
Kill
would
Bill.
Not like that.
No, that would have been awful.
I don't think so.
I mean, really? I think it would have been interesting to see the Hobbit films directed by Guillermo del Toro.
I think the monster work would have been the most interesting.
I think it would have been.
He's got such a unique
out of the box
vision. Very out of the box. And I've seen some of the designs for Smaug when he was in charge, and they're very
wild.
different. Yeah, they're wild. Yeah. Some of them are very wild, which is all part of the process. You get that for any of the adaptations. There's some, they let those artists run wild and then see what sticks. Yeah, but this is an interesting. What if? I love that we immediately thought of ones that we didn't want.
It's so much easier to think of ones I don't want, right? I don't want particular styles.
I do have one that I have thought recently I think would be a fantastic director for a new adaptation of The Hobbit. And that is Paul King, whose work you would know from directing the Paddington movies.
Oh yeah,
and
those were
the new Wonka movie.
Yes,
and the new Wonka movie.
That actually would be a really good spin on the Hobbit.
Right?
You really could turn that into a just a gripping children's tale.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing is like I don't think his style would necessarily work for a prequel to a Peter Jackson film, to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. But I do think the whimsy and the charm that all of his films seem to have, or at least the ones that I've watched of his.
Definitely whimsy comes to mind.
Yeah,
you're right.
The whimsy and the charm, like that is The Hobbit. The Hobbit is so unique in the whole Middle Earth legendarium, in that it is a children's tale. And I look at, I just am delighted every time I watch Wonka in particular. I'm like, this is just a delightful movie. And so, yeah, I think he is one that could nail the charm aspect of a children's tale like The Hobbit.
Maybe. I have to say, if we're going to stick with the Hobbit ideas, maybe another sort of really unusual sort of creative take on it would be Wes Anderson. I'm thinking of the Grand Budapest Hotel or even he did a stop motion film, Fantastic Mr. Fox, that I think I can imagine possibly the Hobbit coming along in that sort of vein.
This is one of those confession things because I know a lot of people love Wes Anderson films. I've only seen a couple of them, and they were just really unique. They're it's a very unique style. I've seen like and this is, I'm gonna reveal my thoughts on AI stuff pretty easily here. I've seen the AI like Lord of the Rings by Wes Anderson, and I find it atrocious.
They don't think that would be him either, by the way.
But yeah, and not to like equate that with the filmmaker's actual work, but
of course.
it's a very unique visual style and everything. But
now I'm thinking all these other unusual, like remember I was like, I don't really know anybody, but I'm like, the more I think about it, there are some others whose style would be really interesting. I'm thinking Tim Burton would have a really interesting take.
It's funny because like you're coming up with like these really interesting visual style ones.
Unique style is what I'm thinking.
My mind is going a totally different direction, and I'm thinking of someone who has really pulled off an adaptation on the same scale.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
You already know. I can tell by your face.
Yep.
When I say Denis Villeneuve.
Yeah, there we go.
That's exactly who you're thinking,
you know why
right?
I didn't say him before as the very first one off the top of my head? Because I didn't know how to pronounce his name correctly. So thank you.
There you go.
That's
Denis
literally
Villeneuve.
the only reason why I didn't mention that. But yeah, Dune, fantastic. And I can only imagine that his take on the Lord of the Rings would be really,
and
really
I think
rich.
he's shown a capability with adaptation that
he has. That's what I'm thinking.
Doing Dune, and even he did Blade Runner 2049,
which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah, which like as a sequel to a classic movie. Yeah, that's no small feat there.
No.
So yeah, I think he would be a really inspired choice too.
I that's, if I'm going to go first choice, it's that.
Yeah, that's a dang good one.
Let's see, let's some other ones that we should avoid. I don't want to insult anybody, but maybe Michael Bay would not be a good choice for the Lord of the Rings, shall we say?
Yeah.
I don't think we need more lens flare.
I'm already like, I'm still getting over what Bayhem did to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So don't talk to me about Tolkien.
No, I don't want to do that. Yeah. I mean, I guess you could look at directors who are like really good with big budgets, because this is a big budget project. I mean, if anybody's going to try to redo the Lord of the Rings, so you're obviously going to be looking at names like Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg. I don't think Spielberg's a good fit for it. I love Spielberg's work. I really, really do. He's one of the very best of our time, but I just don't see his style working with the Lord of the Rings. But I also don't know that I see Christopher Nolan working well with it.
No,
I mean, again, he's got some great films out there.
I think he's beyond kind of like the franchise thing too.
He's well
after doing Batman, I think he seems to be more interested in doing his own
niche. Yeah.
His own things, original stories that
things that make you think, for sure.
Yeah. Or things that you think make you think. That's
fair. That's fair.
I think that's where
intellectual. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where I'm trying to think of what's the most recent film that he made. Well, he did Oppenheimer, but it was before that. Tenet was the one where I was like, I was like, I don't know. I think maybe we're trying to be too intellectual.
We're reading too much into it here. Like maybe this is not as deep as we think it is.
I'm like, once we got past it, Inception and like Interstellar, that kind of area. I think maybe.
Wow.
I really like Interstellar.
Yeah, same.
Yeah.
Interesting. Maybe we need to. I think we had a touch on this once before. It was like name one of Tolkien's works that you'd want to see adapted and by whom. Because I remember I was thinking for some of the more interesting, some of the more like unusual non-legendarium stories. I think I was the one who suggested Wes Anderson for possibly Smith of Wootton Major, giving us that real sense of fairy. I think we could do some other really interesting ideas too. I think Farmer Giles of Ham would be an interesting little satirical comedy, and you could have. I mean, I almost think that would be good as an animation. Or as, wait. Okay, wait. Hear me out. Okay. Farmer Giles of Ham told in the style of Shaun the Sheep.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. One of those Aardman Entertainment.
Yeah, the little
animated
claymation, stop motion stuff. I mean, wouldn't that be perfect to see his cow and his horse and the dragon and oh man, that would be, and his dog, Garm.
Yeah.
That would be
That'd
great.
Be fun.
That'd be so much fun. Good stuff. That was a fun discussion. I really enjoyed that. It was a good question. So thank you. Folks, that does wrap it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. I promise, I know this is a little bit shorter than most of them, but that's okay. Next week, we'll make up for it with a longer one. Come back next week when Cirion would prefer to have sent a text message as we continue the story of Cirion and Eorl.
Yeah, I think text message would definitely have a lower body count.
Yeah, no doubt.
A casualty rate. Much
Only
safer.
1 out of 6. Yeah.
Now, Alan and I want to thank the members of Team PPP here today. Editor Jordan Rannells, Barlaman Becca Davis, Social Media Manager Casey Hilsey, Event and Patreon Community Coordinator Katie McKenna, Graphic Artist Megan Collins, and Website Guru Phil Dean.
And please take a minute to check out theprancingponypodcast.com. That's where you'll find our show notes, outtakes, Prancing Pony Ponderings, as well as our online storefront where you can get PPP merch, including all the really cool episode artwork that Megan's been doing for the show over the last 2+ seasons.
You'll also want to visit our library page. The Prancing Pony Podcast is, after all, a podcast about the books. So if you're interested in a book we've mentioned on the show, you'll find a link for it in our library. We do get a small amount of compensation when you make your purchase, and we thank you for that.
Indeed we do. And we also want to thank our patrons at the Círdan's contribution tier. I'll start with DeMay in Alaska, Chad in Texas, Lance in New Jersey, Paul in Colorado, Joseph in Michigan, Kathy from North Carolina, Carlos in California, Brian in the UK, Jerry from Washington, Joe in Washington, Erwin from the Netherlands, Ben in Minnesota, Anthony in Texas, June in Ireland, Zaksu in Illinois, Sarah in New Jersey, Joshua in Massachusetts, Lucy in Texas, Keith in Alabama, and Erica in Texas.
There's also Carson in Oklahoma, Vivian in California, James in Massachusetts, Ann in Kentucky, Sean in New Jersey, Mason in California, Maureen from Massachusetts, Olivia in London, Robert in Arizona, Nick in Wisconsin, Lewis in South Carolina, Thomas in Germany, Craig in California, Bailey in Texas, Kevin in Massachusetts, Julie in Washington, Bruce in California, Joe in Maryland, Nathan in Arizona, and Kevin in Pennsylvania. Thank you all so very much for your support.
Indeed, thank you.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe now through Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing, as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, how Faramir died in your arms tonight to Barlaman at theprancingponypodcast.com. You thought you might get away without hearing about how he died in his arms. You knew I couldn't avoid that.
Yes. And folks, if you want your voice literally heard, well, just send audio of your question, maybe you singing your question.
No, please don't. Even that, it's too much singing already. There'll be no singing here.
Well, however you want to send it, visit podinbox.com/prancingponypod and record your question for us. Please be sure to still email the question to Barlaman, though.
Yeah, even though Barlaman's been a lot more reliable lately, there is still a lot of mail to sort through. We'll try to get to you just as soon as we're able. As always, though, this has been far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. But until next time,
This is the end. We are going. We are leaving now. Goodbye.